There exists a silent ordeal that the soul must endure, an initiation that no therapist can chart, no self-help book can truly map, and no loved one, however devoted, can fully comprehend. It does not unfold in visible ceremonies, nor does it declare itself with banners of triumph. Instead, it arrives quietly, hidden within the turbulence of your life, concealed in the very storms you thought you were merely surviving. What you once believed to be simple hardship reveals itself, in time, as the most profound examination a human being can encounter. Shi Heng Yi, the Shaolin master who carries the lineage of martial discipline and inner stillness, has often spoken of such unseen initiations. To him, they are not accidents or misfortunes, but sacred gateways through which certain souls must pass. He teaches that within profound suffering, invisible fires are kindled, fires that leave no scars on the skin, yet burn away illusions within, until what remains is essence alone. Few recognize this trial for what it is while it is happening. It disguises itself as chaos, heartbreak, or the collapse of the familiar. And yet, for those who survive its furnace, everything shifts. You may not even be aware that you have already walked through this threshold. The proof is not written on your resume or displayed in external trophies. It whispers in the way you stand in silence, in the calm gravity of your presence, in the subtle quality of your energy that others sense but cannot name. The 7 signs we will explore are not milestones to boast of. They are quiet markers of a consciousness forever altered by its encounter with truth. In the language of Eastern wisdom, it is as though your spirit has undergone a second birth, not of the body, but of awareness. This rebirth does not announce itself with fireworks. It is found in the spaces between words, in the stillness after storms, in the subtle realization that the self you once fought so hard to become has always lived inside you. Shi Heng Yi reminds his students that a tree struck by lightning does not remain as it was. Its branches may char, its bark may split, but deep within, new resilience forms. Not the brittle strength of stubborn resistance, but the supple strength of living wood that bends without breaking. So too does the human spirit transform in suffering. What once poisoned you becomes medicine, what once shattered you becomes clarity. You begin to metabolize chaos itself, refining disorder into wisdom. The first sign reveals itself in your relationship with solitude. Where once aloneness felt like punishment, it transforms into sanctuary. Shi Heng Yi often speaks of the energy of dispersal, the compulsion to scatter ourselves in search of validation, to stretch our life force thin in the desperate pursuit of approval. When that restless scattering ends, when solitude becomes nourishing rather than unbearable, you know something fundamental has shifted. This is not the stillness of despair, nor the emptiness of withdrawal. It is the profound quietude of one who no longer needs to argue with existence, who no longer craves to convince the world, or themselves, of their worth. In such stillness, your inner voice emerges like a spring uncovered. Creativity flows not from constant stimulation, but from the fertile silence of your own presence. In those hours when the world grows quiet, you discover that you are not alone at all. You are accompanied by the deeper layers of your own being, voices that could never be heard in the clamor of external noise. In this, you have touched what Shi Heng Yi calls the unshakable companion, your truest self, which only appears when distractions dissolve. This transformation does not go unnoticed within you. Once you have tasted the sanctuary of true solitude, the second sign emerges, the way you engage with the shadow hidden in your own being. Shi Heng Yi teaches that every person carries within them a reservoir of untamed energies, desires unacknowledged, fear suppressed, anger unexpressed. To deny them is to create imbalance. To face them is to begin the path of mastery. Where once you may have feared these darker aspects, you now meet them with an honesty that is sharp, unflinching, and liberating. You no longer pretend to be only light. You know that within you resides the potential to wound, to manipulate, to grasp for power. And yet, rather than condemning these impulses, you hold them with awareness. They become raw material for transformation. Shi Heng Yi calls this the practice of turning fire into fuel. Anger, which once erupted destructively or lay buried in corrosive silence, becomes what he names sacred fire. It no longer consumes you, it burns away what must be released. Toxic relationships, limiting beliefs, outdated agreements, you let them fall into the flame. The fire clears a space where growth can take root. Others sense this change. Even when you remain silent, your authenticity radiates. You no longer scramble to reconcile contradictions within yourself. Instead, you learn to carry them as one would balance the twin poles of a staff. The paradox itself becomes a source of power. Shi Heng Yi often reminds his students, the bow is strong not because it is rigid, but because it holds tension. You embody that truth now, containing your own contradictions without breaking. Your relationship with emotion itself undergoes a profound shift. Once, overwhelming feelings may have swept you away like a river in flood. Days, weeks, even months could be lost in their undertow. But now, you carry what the Master calls the vessel of stillness. Your emotions do not vanish, if anything, they deepen, but you no longer drown in them. Instead, they flow through you, contained by awareness, refined into clarity. The world notices in subtle ways. Your responses grow steadier, your energy less reactive, your presence more magnetic. You no longer fight to prove your goodness by rejecting the shadow, instead, you reveal your strength by integrating it. And with this integration, the third sign awakens, immunity to projection. No longer do you accept the unprocessed emotions of others as your burden. Where once the drama of others pulled you into spirals of guilt, defense, or conflict, you now see it as it is, an unconscious attempt to hand you what does not belong to you. This recognition does not harden you. It softens you with clarity. You watch these exchanges as one might observe weather, storms moving across the sky, inevitable but impersonal. Your compassion matures. No longer codependent sacrifice, it becomes presence without entanglement. You can stand beside another's suffering without losing yourself in it. Shi Heng Yi speaks of this as standing at the center of the circle, where you observe dualities without being pulled into their chaos. From this place, you act not out of compulsion, but out of choice. Others may call it detachment, but you know it as freedom, the freedom to love without being enslaved, to give without being emptied, to witness without being consumed. From this center of freedom, your perception of time itself transforms. Once, you may have treated time as an adversary to be conquered or a scarce treasure slipping away. Now, time reveals itself as a flowing river in which you participate, not a battlefield where you must fight. Past and future no longer weigh on you with the same urgency. Presence becomes your true dwelling. Shi Heng Yi calls this shift, walking with the breath of eternity. When you breathe fully into this moment, you are no longer imprisoned by what has been, nor enslaved by what might come. You discover that time is not an enemy but a dimension of consciousness, a space you can inhabit with dignity and ease. This shift allows you to release the compulsive chase for results and to embrace the unfolding of life's rhythms. With this awakening, the fourth sign arises, the blossoming of intuition. Once, you relied heavily on logic, calculating risks, weighing pros and cons, seeking advice and consensus. But now, an inner compass has awakened, an unshakable knowing that whispers beneath thought. Decisions that once felt agonizing become fluid. You know when to act, when to wait, when to release. Shi Heng Yi often tells his students, the mind calculates, but the heart knows. This knowing is not sentimentality, it is alignment with the invisible intelligence that moves through all things. Synchronicities appear more frequently, as if unseen threads are guiding events toward a hidden order. You realize these are not coincidences but confirmations that you are attuned to the deeper currents of existence. Your sensitivity sharpens. You perceive the energy beneath people's words, the intentions beneath their gestures, the unspoken truths between sentences. This is not suspicion, nor is it judgment. It is simply awareness tuned to a finer frequency. And while this gift can be challenging, you may see dangers and opportunities long before others, it grounds you in trust, for you know the universe whispers before it shouts. Shi Heng Yi calls this, listening with the whole body. You listen not just with ears but with breath, with skin, with silence. You receive people not as they perform but as they are, recognizing the soul peeking through the masks they wear. This capacity changes how you relate to the world. You no longer chase appearances, you rest in essence. And so, the fifth sign appears, your embrace of cycles. Death and rebirth no longer terrify you. Endings no longer appear as failures but as necessary dissolutions, preludes to renewal. Where once uncertainty paralyzed you, it now energizes you. You understand that the path does not progress in straight lines but in spirals. Each return to a familiar struggle is not regression but a deepening, an invitation to uncover wisdom at a subtler layer. Shi Heng Yi likens this to the art of martial forms, the repetition of the same movement until it ceases to be mere technique and becomes living expression. Life repeats its lessons not to punish, but to refine. You now welcome these returns as opportunities for mastery. Your creativity shifts as well. Once it may have been driven by the hunger for recognition or the fear of irrelevance. Now, creation itself feels like prayer, an offering of your breath back to the greater life force. Work becomes devotion, not performance. You are no longer burdened by the need to prove yourself. You create because it is your way of aligning with the current of existence. As this spiral of growth deepens, the sixth sign arises, your relationship with validation dissolves. Once, your self-worth may have risen and fallen with the approval of others, each praise a temporary balm, each criticism a wound. Now, those fluctuations have quieted. You begin to understand what Shi Heng Yi calls the authority of the inner temple. In this temple, no outside verdict can touch your essence. External opinions, whether adoration or disdain, arrive as passing winds. They may stir the surface of your awareness, but they no longer uproot you. Praise becomes information, not intoxication. Criticism becomes perspective, not condemnation. You are no longer enslaved to the mirrors others hold before you, because you have polished your own mirror within. This shift frees immense energy. Energy once wasted on performance, on anticipating reactions, on managing appearances, now returns to its rightful home, your core. In that center, sovereignty arises. You would rather be rejected for your truth than accepted for a mask. And this choice does not feel like sacrifice, it feels like liberation. Shi Heng Yi reminds us, the bamboo stands tall not by competing with the pine, but by being bamboo completely. You embody this wisdom. Your authenticity becomes non-negotiable. You move through the world not begging for space but offering presence as a gift. Even in silence, you radiate the calm assurance of one who belongs to themselves first. This deepening authority reflects in the body itself. Your posture changes. Your movements acquire a grounded ease. You inhabit your skin as a sovereign inhabits their land, not rigid, not defensive, but at home. Others sense this groundedness. They may not be able to articulate it, but they feel it as safety, as strength, as clarity. And then the seventh sign emerges, energetic sovereignty. This is perhaps the most precious of all transformations. You no longer scatter yourself across every invitation, every demand, every plea for attention. Instead, you become selective, offering your energy as one would offer sacred water, carefully, consciously, only where it nourishes life. Shi Heng Yi calls this, guarding the flame. Just as a monk shields the candle from wind, you shield your essence from being drained by projects, people, or patterns that take without giving. This is not elitism. It is devotion to the sacred task of preserving your life force for what truly matters. Boundaries that once filled you with guilt now arise naturally. Saying no no longer feels cruel, but clear. You protect your vitality as you would protect a child, knowing that without this protection, your gifts cannot serve the world. And in this sovereignty, you begin to recognize what the master names energy thieves. They appear as endless obligations, relationships built on guilt, or distractions disguised as opportunities. Where once you would have surrendered your energy out of fear, you now conserve it with love, for yourself, and for the work you came here to do. Perhaps most profound of all, your relationship with suffering itself has shifted. Pain no longer appears as a punishment to be endured or a curse to be feared. It has become a teacher. You do not seek it, yet when it comes, you meet it with openness, listening for the lesson hidden in its fire. Shi Heng Yi teaches that the lotus grows only in the mud. You understand this now, not as a metaphor, but as lived truth. Your wounds have ripened into wisdom. Your scars have become maps. What once threatened to break you has instead revealed the indestructible within you. From here, a stillness begins to follow you, not the lifeless stillness of stagnation, but the deep, living calm of a river that knows its own course. It is the kind of centeredness that others feel before they understand. People are drawn to it, sensing something they cannot name. Shi Heng Yi calls this the fragrance of wholeness. It is not performed, it simply emanates. This presence does not mean you have become detached from the world. On the contrary, it allows you to engage more fully, but without losing yourself. Where once you sought hope as a fragile wish for a certain outcome, now hope matures into trust. Trust not in specific events, but in the life process itself. This is what Shi Heng Yi calls faith without clinging, a quiet confidence that whatever arises, you have the capacity to meet it. You no longer wait anxiously for the future to justify your present. You live the present as its own justification. What once felt like an endless struggle to become someone worthy has dissolved into the recognition that you were already carrying that worth all along. The masks you wore, the battles you fought to prove yourself, they fall away, leaving only the truth of your being. Shi Heng Yi speaks of this as the second birth. Not a birth of flesh, but of awareness. In this birth, you are no longer defined by the wounds of childhood, the expectations of family, or the programming of society. You stand independent of them, not in rebellion, but in freedom. The past ceases to bind you because you no longer need to recover from it. You are too busy creating from the present. What once seemed like destiny imposed from outside now reveals itself as a canvas waiting for your brush. Your suffering no longer dictates your identity, it becomes raw material for expression. Your challenges no longer imprison you, they sculpt you into a form capable of carrying wisdom. And so, the secret that Shi Heng Yi imparts becomes your lived reality. The soul does not grow despite suffering but through it. Pain, when met consciously, ceases to be an enemy. It becomes initiation. It strips away what is false until only the essential remains. You now carry the quiet dignity of one who has met themselves fully, not flawless, but whole. Not untouched by hardship, but transformed by it. If you recognize yourself in these signs, know that you have walked through a gate that many never even glimpse. Your transformation is not only for you, it becomes a beacon, a pattern of possibility for others who wander in their own dark night, uncertain if dawn will come. And perhaps this is the final gift: you realize your journey, though deeply personal, is also universal. Each scar, each silence, each surrender has woven you into a larger tapestry of awakening. The test has revealed not who you thought you should be, but who you truly are, the irreplaceable consciousness you were always meant to embody. When you stand in this place of recognition, something extraordinary occurs. The burdens you once carried as private tragedies reveal themselves as sacred offerings. Shi Heng Yi teaches that when the soul integrates its deepest lessons, it ceases to hoard them. Instead, it radiates them quietly into the world, like incense rising without effort. You no longer need to preach or persuade, your very presence becomes teaching. This is the mystery of transmission. In the Shaolin tradition, it is said that true wisdom is not taught through words, but through the silent force of energy. The way you breathe, the way you walk into a room, the way your eyes meet another's, these subtle gestures become carriers of your transformation. People feel steadier in your company, not because you solve their problems, but because you embody the possibility that problems can be survived and transmuted. Your life becomes less about achieving and more about aligning. You no longer chase recognition, for you see that recognition is fleeting. You no longer beg destiny to spare you, for you have learned that destiny is not punishment, it is practice. Every challenge now feels less like a curse and more like a form, a kata, a discipline designed to refine your spirit. Shi Heng Yi often reminds his students, the universe is not against you. It is sculpting you. You now live as evidence of this truth. Every loss carved space for deeper compassion. Every failure stripped away illusions of control. Every betrayal dissolved false attachments. Through these dissolutions, something unshakable emerged, the awareness that you cannot be diminished by what happens to you. This is the flowering of what the Master calls the unmovable center. In this place, joy is not the opposite of sorrow, it is the thread that runs through both. Strength is not the absence of weakness, it is the willingness to embrace weakness without shame. Wholeness is not perfection, it is the reconciliation of all parts of yourself into one harmonious rhythm. As this realization deepens, you begin to see your path not as a solitary ascent but as part of a larger unfolding. Your healing, your transformation, is not only for you. It becomes a contribution to the collective. By embodying resilience, you create a living map for others who feel lost in the labyrinth of suffering. By walking with dignity, you remind others that dignity is possible even in the midst of trials. And perhaps this is the truest mark that you have passed through your soul's most painful test. You no longer ask, "Why me?" Instead, you ask, "How can what I have lived become light for someone else?" In this turning, your story ceases to be only your own. It becomes part of a wider current, flowing into the lives of others like a hidden spring. Shi Heng Yi teaches that when the soul awakens, it naturally becomes a mirror, not to glorify itself, but to reflect possibility back into the eyes of those who are searching. Without effort, you carry a quiet message: transformation is real. You, too, can walk through fire and not be consumed. This is not the role of a savior, nor the burden of a teacher in the conventional sense. It is simply the inevitability of presence. Just as a candle does not force itself to shine, you no longer force your wisdom onto others. Instead, your very way of being communicates what words cannot. People may not understand why they feel calmer around you, why their chaos softens, why their hearts loosen, but they sense it. This is what Shi Heng Yi calls the invisible teaching. At the same time, you no longer cling to the need to fix or rescue. In earlier stages, compassion may have driven you to overextend, to carry weights that were never yours. Now, compassion has matured. You recognize the sacred boundary between support and interference. You can walk alongside another's suffering without stealing their lesson from them. You know that to save someone from their fire is often to rob them of their rebirth. This discernment brings with it a new kind of solitude, not loneliness, but sacred aloneness. For you see that while we walk together, each soul must pass through its own gates of darkness. You honor this truth, respecting the journeys of others while remaining anchored in your own. And yet, paradoxically, this solitude connects you more deeply than ever before. You no longer seek connection to escape yourself, you connect because you are already whole. Relationships become less about filling a void and more about celebrating presence. Love, in this form, is no longer a bargain of needs, it is a meeting of freedoms. Shi Heng Yi often reminds his students, only when the cup is full can it overflow. Having filled your own cup with silence, with shadow, with suffering transformed, you now overflow naturally. Your love becomes less desperate, more luminous. It carries no hooks, no demands, no hidden transactions. And so, you begin to see that your suffering has not only healed you, it has refined you into a vessel of transmission. You carry not only your own strength but the archetypal story of human resilience. The test you endured was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to reveal that you could not be destroyed. This recognition does not inflate your ego. On the contrary, it humbles you. You understand that you are not special for having suffered. Everyone suffers. But you are grateful for having seen through suffering into its deeper meaning. You bow to the fire that once threatened to consume you, for it has revealed your true nature. With this bow to the fire, you step into what Shi Heng Yi calls the way of gratitude. Gratitude no longer appears only when life is kind, when blessings are obvious, or when prayers are answered in familiar forms. Gratitude becomes your natural response to all things, even to hardship, even to endings, even to silence. For you have discovered that everything serves. This is the eighth unfolding. Your relationship with reality itself has transformed. Where once you resisted, argued, or demanded, now you receive. This receiving is not passive, it is deeply active. It is the openness of a warrior who has laid down the futile fight against what is and instead uses each moment as training. Every encounter, whether pleasant or painful, becomes an exercise in alignment. Shi Heng Yi often says, "Do not waste energy asking the river to flow uphill. Learn instead to flow with it." You now embody this wisdom. Life no longer feels like an enemy to be controlled. It feels like a companion, unpredictable and wild, but trustworthy in its ultimate direction. This trust allows you to move with greater ease, conserving energy for what truly matters. Your perception of cycles deepens even further. You see how creation and destruction, gain and loss, union and separation are not opposites but partners. The rising and falling of fortune, the waxing and waning of relationships, the coming and going of seasons, these no longer destabilize you. Instead, you welcome them as part of the eternal dance. With this acceptance, your creativity evolves once again. What you bring into the world is no longer rooted in ambition or fear. It is born of service. Your work, your art, your gestures become offerings, not to prove your worth, but to honor the current of life flowing through you. In this way, every action becomes sacred, even the smallest. Washing a cup, walking a path, speaking a word, each can be infused with presence. And as your actions become offerings, your very existence begins to harmonize with the unseen order. Synchronicities multiply. Doors open without effort. People arrive at the right time. Opportunities align as though choreographed by something larger. Shi Heng Yi calls this the path of least resistance, not because it is easy, but because it flows with the design of life rather than against it. Those around you may not always understand this change. Some may even feel unsettled by your ease, for it reveals their own struggle. But others, those ready to awaken, will feel illuminated by your presence. Without speaking, you show them that another way of living is possible. A way not built on constant striving, but on trust. Not built on fear of loss, but on reverence for the cycle. And so, you begin to sense that your journey has ripened into something greater than survival. You are no longer just passing through life, you are collaborating with it. No longer a passenger dragged by fate, you become a partner to destiny. This partnership with destiny ushers in what Shi Heng Yi describes as the flowering of inner freedom. You realize that freedom has little to do with external conditions. It is not about having unlimited choices, wealth, or recognition. True freedom is the ability to remain centered no matter what arises. It is the power to choose your response, even when you cannot choose your circumstances. This ninth unfolding is subtle yet profound. You no longer measure your life by external standards of success or failure. Instead, you measure it by alignment, whether your actions, words, and thoughts resonate with the rhythm of your soul. A simple day lived in authenticity feels more fulfilling than a grand achievement born of compromise. Shi Heng Yi often teaches that chains are not always made of iron, sometimes they are made of praise. You understand this deeply now. You see how the need for approval can be as binding as open rejection, how even admiration can become a prison if you shape yourself to maintain it. By stepping free of this need, you reclaim the fullness of your being. With this freedom comes a refinement of energy. You no longer scatter yourself to prove worth or to keep others comfortable. Your presence becomes deliberate. Your words carry weight, not because they are loud, but because they are rooted. Your silence communicates more than explanations once could. People feel that when you speak, you mean it, and when you don't, you are fully at peace with that too. This centeredness naturally awakens discernment. You begin to see clearly what nourishes your essence and what depletes it. Some relationships, once tolerated, now fall away because they no longer harmonize with your vibration. Certain pursuits, once urgent, now dissolve because they do not serve your deeper purpose. You choose not from fear of missing out, but from devotion to alignment. And perhaps most liberating of all, guilt loses its grip. Boundaries that once felt like walls of separation now feel like bridges of clarity. You no longer apologize for protecting your energy, for you know it is the very source from which your service to others flows. This is what Shi Heng Yi calls the compassionate no, a refusal rooted not in rejection, but in love. As this freedom ripens, suffering itself changes meaning. Pain may still visit you, but you meet it differently. Instead of collapsing into resistance, you lean into inquiry. What is this here to show me? In this way, even difficulty becomes dialogue, a form of communication between you and life. And the quiet dignity you carry deepens. You no longer walk as one who needs to convince the world of your survival. You walk as one who has discovered that survival was never the point. Transformation was. Wholeness was. Awakening was. At last, you come to recognize the full scope of the journey. The test you thought would destroy you was, in truth, the initiation that revealed you. Shi Heng Yi calls this, the second birth of the soul. It is not dramatic, not announced with applause or recognition. It is quiet, almost invisible to the outside world. But within, it rearranges everything. This second birth is not about becoming someone new, it is about uncovering who you always were beneath layers of fear, conditioning, and illusion. The person you fought so hard to become fades, and in their place, the true self emerges, unforced, undeniable, irreplaceable. You realize now that the soul's growth does not happen despite suffering, but through it. Pain has been your teacher. Darkness has been your temple. What you thought were wounds have become wisdom, what you thought were endings have become thresholds. The very struggles that once filled you with despair have revealed the strength that cannot be broken. Shi Heng Yi often tells his disciples, do not curse the fire that tempered the blade. You now understand this. Every scar, every silence, every surrender has been part of the forging. You are not flawless, but you are whole. Not untouched by life, but transformed by it. And in this wholeness lies the final sign, a maturity of hope. You no longer cling desperately to outcomes or demand that life unfold according to your vision. Instead, hope becomes trust in your own capacity to meet whatever arises with grace. You engage fully, yet hold outcomes lightly. You walk the path wholeheartedly, yet without chains of expectation. This is the dignity of one who has completed the soul's most painful test. Not unscarred, but integrated. Not untouched, but awakened. You carry now the quiet authority of one who has looked into their own depths and did not turn away. If you recognize yourself in these signs, know this, you have undergone an initiation that many will never name, though countless souls quietly endure it. Your transformation is not only your own. It becomes a template for others, a living proof that the fire can be endured, that the storm can be survived, that the darkness conceals a hidden dawn. Perhaps you feel called to share your recognition, not as confession, but as confirmation, a light for those still walking in silence. And if you do, let it serve as reminder, your journey is still unfolding. The test did not end your path, it opened it. What lies ahead is not survival, but conscious evolution. The soul's painful test has revealed you, not as who you thought you must be, but as the being you were always meant to embody. Walk with that dignity. Walk with that strength. Walk with the quiet knowing that your pain has become your teacher, your wounds your wisdom, your suffering your strength. You have passed through the fire, and you are still here. Whole. Alive. Awake.